It's amazing to get talking to you. I haven't spoke to you since um Jesus, when was it?
Would have been Debt Collectors or Avengement.
I'm actually thinking, would it have been Savage Dogs?
It could have been going that far back. You would have been a very
Yeah,
little boy back then.
yeah, I think that was it. Jesus,
Right.
it's been a while.
Good, good. Well, I'm glad you're still in and doing it and carrying the flag. Thank you very much.
No worries, man. I'm gonna jump in here and bombard you with these questions
Okay.
that I've been waiting like a week to ask you.
Yeah.
Man, so I got to watch One Ranger recently, and you wrote and directed it. What inspired you to write and direct this story?
I just really like the idea of a cat out of water, a fish out of water, a cat from Texas, that was, had a certain way of doing things, a very old world way of doing things, coming to the UK and sort of being dropped into a scenario where they did things very differently, and seeing those two worlds collide, and then to put an action film on top of that, I thought would be interesting and fun to do.
Man, I was getting Chuck Norris vibes. Was there any inspiration from Chuck himself in there?
Not really. There was one Chuck Norris, I think it was Lone Wolf McQuade, which was sort of similar territory. But I love Chuck. He wrote a letter for my green card. I did stunts on Walker Texas Ranger for a long time. Uh, but honestly, the inspirations for this were more like Coogan's Bluff, which was a Clint Eastwood movie, and Madigan, which was a John Wayne picture. That it's going back a little bit further. I like taking older stuff, more classic movies, and seeing what I can take from those that worked really, really well and putting it into a modern scenario. I find that exciting, interesting. There's only so many stories, and what worked 80 years ago, in essence, it will still be capable of entertaining to this day. 800 years ago, 8,000 years ago, we're a basic species. We like to sit, we at one point we sat around a fire while a village elder told us a story, and it kept us excited, and that's what we're doing with movies. We're doing that, and it's important not to forget that. You can get carried away with trying to copy the latest trend, whether it's doing your whole movie in one take, which isn't new at all. They were doing it in the 80s, in the 90s. Mike Figgis did it, you you know Alfred Hitchcock did it, or you can get more focused on what the actual story is and what's interesting there and the meat of it. But neither one is wrong or right. It's just different ways of telling a story. And as I say, they're all variations on a theme. And this is a variation on what I think is like 1960s or 70s action movie. So that was my
Man,
source.
out of all that, I just was shocked that they were doing one takes back in the day. I actually thought that was just a new thing, but clearly, if Hitchcock was doing it, it's a
Yeah.
trend like everything else that has just came
It's a
back
film called
out.
Rope. It's a movie called Rope, and he was working with cameras that had a 9.5 minute magazine on them. So they'd rehearse around 9.5 minutes, and at the end of that 9.5, the camera would go behind someone's back or behind a piece of furniture, and it would go dark, and that would be the cut. And the next one, they'd bring it out of the person's back and out of the furniture, and they'd use the wipe as a cut. And so if you watch Rope, it's 10 minute sections all put together. Mike Figgis did it. Lots of people have done it. It's nothing new. It is what it is. It's an interesting way of doing, of making a movie. And nowadays we do magic cuts anyway. So there's cuts all the way through it, but they're blending them with CG and moving it so you don't, it's imperceptible like they did in 1917. It is what it is. It's a gimmick. It's a sales gimmick, like vibrating chairs or smell-o-vision or 3D, or the tingler, when they electrocuted the seat while the guys were watching it at the cinema, so you felt you're actually in there. As I say, there's nothing wrong with it, and it's ingenious and it's fun, but you're just one form of a circus barker, bringing people in with something new and different. But the truth of the matter is, we're there to see stories, and we're there to be moved and elevated and feel a state of grace and taken somewhere. You've got to combine everything if possible, not only the gimmicks but also the stories as well. But yeah,
And another
we're
thing
getting
that
further away from this movie.
Another thing that One Ranger has, which is an instant attraction, this is what drew me in completely, was the casting of Thomas Jane in the lead role. So what qualities did you see in Thomas that made you think he is the perfect for the lead role in this?
Thomas, I've wanted to work with a while. I've been to his house 2 or 3 times, and we've been talking about different movies that might work. Uh, he's got a fascination with the American West. He has a fascination for sort of older movies, in the same way that I do. Firearms, knives, sort of an interesting sort of outdoorsy mentality. And I thought there was something very interesting about it. And he had a particular affinity for the old school Texas Rangers, and wanted to take that on and live in that, and sort of become Ranger Tyree for the duration of the movie, accent and everything. He was talking in that accent between takes, and that sort of appealed to him. And I liked, at the end of the day, I like his movies. I've liked his acting in the past, but it's also, whether it's going to be right for this character or not is also, a gamble. And I'm glad we had him. I really enjoyed working with him, and I think that he brought a very rich performance to this role, and it needed it, because it's sort of quite a lightweight movie, and we didn't have any time to make it, no money and all that kind of stuff. So it needed to be grounded in as much seriousness as possible, and I think he did that. I was very, very appreciative of it. He got in and did a lot of stunts. That there was a couple of sort of scary moments where I went to the second unit where they were doing a little bit of the fight stuff, and I see the stuntman for Thomas sitting there sort of eating a sandwich. What the hell are you doing? You guys are supposed to be working. What's going on? It's Thomas is in there. He's doing it all himself. And then watch for a bit, and he's hitting the ground. He hurt his knee at one point, but that's a commitment that wasn't necessary. It was a commitment that Thomas decided and chose to take on to make the film better. So for that, I'm really appreciative, and I think he's brilliant.
That's what you got to love about these movies that aren't given a budget, and you haven't got all the luxuries like you would get in, say, like the Avengers or something like that. Use are just bare bones, and then you've got the lead actor who would just throw himself in and be like, get his hands dirty. You can't beat that.
It's good. I would kill for a budget like the Avengers. We do these pictures, and you hope that you hit one out of the park, and it becomes something that's going to put you on the way to getting a better cast or better budget next time around. It's very, very tricky though, because each time it's sort of a spin of the roulette wheel, because with the kind of minimal dollars that they give you to do these, the film is always one step into being an absolute disaster, unmitigated, not finishing, just unwatchable. And if you really, really determine to put your heart and soul into it, every ounce of energy, put your own money into it, put your own time into it, you may just be able to get it to be worthwhile watching. And it's very, very tricky, because as I say, each morning you wake up, one thing goes wrong, the film can fail, badly. And it's terrifying. On the bigger ones, you have a lot more scope for sort of experimentation, working out what's going to happen. You've had pre-production period to plan everything out, storyboard it, know exactly what's going on. You've got people who are the best in their field surrounding you, second unit directors, crew, cast members. You do these ones, and a lot of the people have never been on a film set before, and you're getting kids who are, enthusiastic, if you're lucky.
And the film is essentially, it's like a modern day Western, just to sort of sum it all up. Would you ever want to do like an old school Western, like proper horses and like the old saloon, the six shooters? Would that be up your street?
It's my favorite genre. I absolutely love westerns, and I would kill to do one. I'd love to get out there and do one. It's as I say, it's the business of making movies is about pre-selling the film ahead of time, and the film has to have a certain amount of pre-sales and people interested in committing money to it. And getting westerns pre-sold is tricky. It's based all upon the cast member and who's in it, and you can't just put anyone in a western. It ends up looking gloopy. You get some guy in there with a dyed toupee and way too old to be realistically playing that part, and suddenly the film is no longer authentic to what a true Western is, where rugged individuals going up against, you know, the elements and very bad people. So it's a tricky one. You know, I will, you know, we'll get it done, and my budgets are each movie, you know, getting a little bit more notoriety. You do a couple of pictures that are good, and suddenly you're on a roll. And I've been lucky to do that. And I've done it. You know, I've got 2 films coming out that are much bigger budgets and much more ambitious and personal. So, and if they hit, then you get a chance to go bigger. And if your name can become as much of a draw as the actors who are in your movies, then you have the chance to pick and choose. But yeah, I love westerns. I think they're phenomenal. Films of Anthony Mann and Bud Bodeker and Sergio Leone, John Ford, Hawks, Raoul Walsh. These are pictures that I watch between films to remind myself what it is that I'm doing and what I want to be, you know. So yeah, I would love to. It's a good question.
It was just weird the way you said that if your name could be just as big as the actors, but like if I seen a movie and I looked at the cover and I was like, oh, what's this about? And then I seen Jesse V. Johnson, instant sale.
You're a good
Yeah.
man. I love
I
it. You know,
know I know loads of people with like
compliment your
piercing.
interviewees talking. No, I do, and that's the way I always look for films. You know, my girlfriend will say, "Oh, that's, you know, which actor's in that?" So I don't know what actor's in it, but it's a Raoul Walsh picture, it's a Hawks picture, it's worth seeing. Let's grab it. You know,
Yeah,
I collect
exactly.
esoteric pictures from their earlier in their careers, and the draw has always been the you know, I've never watched a film because it's a McQueen film or a John Wayne film that doesn't interest me. I'll watch based upon who the director is, but we're in the minority. The majority of people the dog is trying to escape. He's got bored with me talking. The majority of people go to see a star, and we face that, and that's what it is. But if you can get to the point where your name is moving the needle a little bit, you have the ability to have a little bit more choice in what it is you're doing, and that's fantastic. It's just money. It's a business like any other. You know, in the old days, there was a biography called Name Above the Title by Frank Capra, who was a fantastic director from the golden age of Hollywood. And the title of the movie explains the aspirations of a director at that point was to get your name above the title so people would see it. Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, for example, you know, and then they know it, or Hitchcock, Name Above the Title, you know. So that's where you're aiming, and you're trying to do that, or in a very small sense, the lowest you know, sense imaginable, which is where I am, where you get something of a name for a particular kind of film, and a buyer will go, you know what, we get that one, it'll have action of a certain level, it'll look nice, it'll, you know, there'll be a story that's coherent and somewhat touching, and hopefully that's enough, you know, to get you. But as I say, each step is about trying to strategically plot out how, you know, the next film will elevate you a little bit. It's a long game, not an overnight thing, you know. And I take great sort of pleasure from the fact that a lot of my heroes took not dozens of films, but in John Ford's case, 200 movies before we saw Stagecoach or anything that actually we remember him for now. And it's a craft you learn, and you get better at, and you watch, and you sort of, you know, take lessons along the way, and I'm making better films now than I've ever made before, you know, in my 50s, and I find them exciting and interesting, and I feel more potential than I've ever felt. But it's you know, you just never know. Maybe I'll say the same thing in a decade's time, you know. Which
Just like fine wine, isn't it? It gets better with age.
no, I don't know. Maybe like a fine wine. That might be a way of describing it. You're just hoping you don't go off, you know. But I'm very proud of this picture. I think Thomas did great. I think Dominic Tipper is very, very good in it, and I think Dean Jagger is fabulous in it. And it was really, really a pleasure working with them. I like Malkovich. It's my second time with him. He's always fun. I think he enjoyed being in Ipswich. they put him in a hotel which on the pictures looked like a big castle, but in actual fact it was midsummer, so it was packed with tons of tourists everywhere, English tourists with their families running around making a lot of noise. I was like, oh my god, he's going to hate it, he's going to throw a tantrum, he's going to leave the film. I saw him on that second or third day. He'd been, and, you know, he gave me a little time to get over jet lag and everything. I said, how's the hotel? He said, oh, I love it, it's wonderful. And what he was doing, he was walking around, and he'd stand in the lobby just long enough for people to see him, and then he'd sort of move on to the next room. and people go, is that John Malkovich? And of course he looks more like John Malkovich than anyone you can imagine, even though he is John Malkovich. But it's you know, and he was doing this and just sort of floating around there. And I guess that must be quite fun.
Was it
Sure,
a challenging filming the movie on location in London?
It was very, very tough shoot. We shot mainly in Ipswich for London, around the marina, around the back streets there. It was extraordinarily cold when we were shooting those sequences. Malkovich's was a little later. The coldest I've ever known. And then we, you know, just difficult locations, and you know, buildings that were falling down and all over the place there, and everything seemed to be like moving in with your feet in cement. It was a very strange shoot, but in some ways that sort of worked for the, you know, made everyone feel a little uncomfortable, you know, performance wise. I know Thomas had a very uncomfortable time in London and England, and so that sort of played on him because the character didn't want to be there either. So I think he used a lot of that in his performance. But yeah, it was tough. It was not easy at all. You know, I'm used to making films in a very American way, where people on that crew are very much devoted to making the best film imaginable, you know, and they've come to America or moved to Los Angeles, left comforts behind because of their love for making movies and their you know, desire to do that. And you get a certain commitment which is very unique anywhere in the world. And then I'm dealing with in the UK, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different psychology. These guys, it's any other job. So the moment you get to, you know, the hour of overtime of the, you know, the 11.5-hour digit, you know, tools are put down and people walk away, whether we're mid scene, mid sentence, first take, second take, none of that sort of matters, because it's about what's going on. And it became quite upsetting until I adopted the mindset that that's just a different way of doing things. It's how they do it basically everywhere other than Los Angeles, where there's this joy of self, you know, emulation, you know, this almost self-destructive desire to make great movies. And I love that, but I realize it is self-destructive. And, you know, there's a balance, I think, in between, you know, but it was difficult making it in England. It was tough. And I was, you know, we shot the American sequences obviously in the US. I was quite happy to get back and get into those.
One Ranger as well also features, it's got like loads of action, loads of stunts.
I do love it. I love shooting Avengement in England, and I do like it. And I've got another film, Boudica, which I enjoyed, but this one was tough, man. This was just tough. But yeah.
What was like challenging about shooting all like the action sequences for this film and the stunts? Would it have been that you did have a limited time and you did have a limited budget?
Always. You just got to plan it out. You know, literally, you plan it. I do a shot list in the morning. And you read it. The first shot list that comes out has maybe 30 setups for the day. You know, you can't do 30 setups in one day. So then you start filtering it down. It's like haiku. You try to get it down and down and down until you're in around about 16 or 20 setups. And even that can be ambitious depending on the complexity of the setup, how much action's involved, how much special effects, how much time it takes to retake. You figure, you know, you go through your shot list and figure, well, they're prepping for that. I can shoot this over here, get that in the can. I'll come back and we'll be able to do a second take here because they'll have been able to reset for that. So it becomes very, very scientific, very mechanical. And then on top of that, you sit down and then you look through the lens, you know, through the camera itself, and you're like, okay, now how do we make it artful? How do we make it beautiful? And you're hoping that your DP has lit it in a way that makes it attractive and interesting, and you'll help frame it a little bit. But you've already worked ahead of time on that shot list, trying to hone that down. And it's very, very delicate. So if anything affects that shoot throughout that day, for example, there's a power outage or a camera goes down, or we get kicked out of a location for making too much noise and we have to find anything that stops you for half hour, 40 minutes, 1 hour, devastates the rest of the day and requires an entire reorganization. And this is how low budget action films are made. There's no other way of doing it. You know, I've read biographies on Sam Peckinpah, and he took 6 days to sit in that church on his own with the crew on payroll while he thought about how he wanted to shoot that final shootout. When it came to shooting, it was very quick, but you can't do that. That's not even, you know, you couldn't take one day, you couldn't take 2 hours to think about how you're going to shoot a sequence. You have to have that in your pocket when you come to set on an indie movie. And that's the way it is. And I believe that's probably how it is with everyone. I don't think I'm unique in any respect, but the sheer homework that goes into this, you don't sleep, you don't go out at night, you get home, you wrap, you go back to the hotel, you start on your shot list, you start pulling apart the following day's work. You might eat a little bit while you're there at the desk at the hotel. You fall asleep, usually fully dressed, with shot lists on the floor or one in your hand. You get up again early because you can't sleep because you're energized. You go through that shot list again. You get to set before anyone else, which is imperative because you want to make sure you see what's going on. If part of the set is flooded, or the wall that you thought you were going to film against has fallen over in the night, you are able to take a different tactic. But you get there earlier than else. You walk around, and quite often you'll have great ideas in that quiet 20 minutes before the chaos turns up. And then when everyone gets there, you've got to be calm and collected and get through the whole day based upon that, with what feels like just an endless array of saboteurs and disasters trying to slow you down. So it's an interesting one. Before I was directing indie movies, I was stunt performing and a little bit of coordination, but mainly performing on huge movies. And it's just very, very different, and you have to realign your gears to get in there. We shot Garrett Warren and I ran the Battle of Stamford Ferry on Lincoln for Spielberg, and it was 1 day's filming, and for that 1 day's filming we trained extras and stuntmen for 2 weeks. Actually, we cast them, which took 2 weeks because they had to have a specific look, and then we trained them until it got up to, we had 400 people we had to train in bayonet fighting, and then we shot for 11 days of vignettes, which were going to Spielberg and Adam Somner and getting chosen until he'd chosen 6 vignettes, and those were the 6 we shot in that 1 day. So that 2 minutes of battle that you see in Lincoln took nearly 6 or 7 weeks of prep and work every day, 9 to 5, and that's great and that's wonderful. And God, I would love to make movies that way. But when you're doing a picture like One Ranger, we don't have 6 weeks to prep that entire film,
Yeah.
We're probably there 3 weeks and probably maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks with crew, and it's terrifying. And but there is an enormous disparity that isn't brought to light. In the old days, you'd have A movies and B movies, and everyone knew the difference. And quite often the B movies were better than the A movies, especially in the case of Don Siegel or Sam Fuller or those guys. You don't have that anymore. It's streaming, and everything is basically shoulder to shoulder. Even in video days, you'd have the A movies, and then you'd go over there, and those were the sort of the cool B movies. And quite often you'd choose one of those just because you knew what it was going to be so watered down with the A movie, But with everything blended together, we're in a very dangerous time in cinema. Dangerous because I see it becoming more and more difficult to make anything original,
So I found One Ranger to be, it was like a fun throwback movie, and you had Thomas Jane it was just kicking ass, and it's what you want to see Thomas Jane do, really, isn't it? After
It
seeing
really, it really is. I wanted to see a guy that just wouldn't give up. I didn't want any martial arts. I wanted to fight old school. He's not Keanu Reeves. I didn't want that. He's just a guy who's got incredible intestinal fortitude. He's been trained a little bit, as all policemen and rangers have, but he just was not going to give up. He had a mission, and it wasn't to do with money or stealing or anything like that. He was just going to keep pounding away until he got these guys, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, exactly. He's a tough guy, but I wouldn't say he gets his ass kicked, but he takes a beating.
Oh, he does. He gets his ass kicked.
Which I thought that was great, because when you see him, you're like, he's a hardcore Texas Ranger. But then once he's fighting the big brute dude, you're like, oh, this dude's gonna tear him around a little bit, and your fella does, puts him through walls and everything, but he keeps coming back.
Yeah, Jess Liaudin, he's great, isn't he? I thought he was terrific.
Fantastic.
I love the real tough guys I've met have always talked quietly. Very, very few of them have been loud mouths. They talk quietly to you, and they're thoughtful, a lot more thoughtful than you think. And those are the ones to be really scared of. And I think he did a good job with that performance. I really do.
So when it comes to One Ranger as a whole, is there any particular like aspect of the film that you're especially proud of?
I love doing that opening with Thomas on horseback. We based it on Man of the West. The framing with when the title comes up and there's a hill on either side of him. I love it's. I think it's one of the few times I've worked with horses and seen the guy in cowboy hat on the horse and the moving camera work. I liked it. I really enjoyed that, and that was a real thrill to do.
Before I wrap with you, I have to ask because it's been so long since we spoke. It's been feels like decades, right? Um, so you've probably been asked this a million times, but do you think we'll ever get to see a triple threat too?
Triple threat. Could do. Yeah, I've been asked about it, but it's a tricky one. There's a lot of people you've got to, a lot of people to round up and corral. It would take a producer with quite some metal to get everyone together again. But yeah, it was a hell of a lot of fun that one shooting that.
Do you have any like sort of story ideas or anything you could tease where you take the next installment?
I don't know. I think one of the most exciting things about it was Scott's bad guy, and he gets killed so monstrously. But it'd be nice to try and work out how he could come back, or how we could have him do another run on it. I like Daniel Bernhardt, who makes a great bad guy, and it's a phenomenal fighter. But Scott's really interesting in that picture. I thought the way he fought everyone was fun, but you know, or you'd simply keep Tiger, Eco, and Jar, and then just change the bad guys around, because there's a lot of good guys that we could bring in.
I thought it would have been one of them things that would have just spawned a sequel almost instantly. Because
Really did. It was amazingly successfve,
yeah,
surprisingly successful considering everything, because it was a brutal post production. But yeah, no, I've been asked a couple of times by that producer to come up with something, to think about it, to see what we could do. So it'd be fun to do.
you could do Scott Adkins' character that died in the first one. His twin brother comes in looking for revenge. He just has a different hairstyle, and he has a
Or we
good
just
team.
ignore it like we did with debt collectors, and we just read. They came back to life again for the second one. He didn't have to mention it in one line. Oh yeah, have a bit of a headache.
And that's my next question. Do you reckon you'll round that off as a trilogy, or do you reckon it would just be as a movie and its sequel?
Scott asked me yesterday, funnily enough. He said he just did Comic Con, and the film he got asked about more than any other at Comic Con was whether there'll be a Debt Collectors Part 3. And I don't know. I don't know. Those first two were very tight. I mean, they were just tiny, tiny little movies. And a film like that finishes, and then it's left to me to shoot all the inserts and continue. The film shoots in 16 or 18 days. Everyone goes home. Scott's on another movie. Lewis goes back to Bulgaria, and I'm left, for the next, 6 to 9 months finishing the film, shooting footage, trying to work out how to make it work. And Debt Collectors 2 put me in hospital. My friends actually had to drop me off there and put saline in me and all that kind of stuff. And then you drag yourself out. I liked the two characters. I wrote the script. It was my first script that I ever wrote. I was a young man when I wrote that. It was based on two people that I knew who were in Hollywood working as actors who had been debt collectors, and they both told me their stories, and I took little bits from each one of them. Jerry Trimble and Dominic Vandenberg, and since the second one, it became very much Scott and Louis' characters, and I think people just love him. They just really like him. So I'm not saying no, but it would have to be under the right circumstances. I'm an older fella now, and my paycheck's a little different, and my rent is more. So,
And then finally, before we wrap, Savage Dog 2. I always wondered about it, but it sits quite well as a standalone movie.
yeah, I'd love to do that one. That one I really enjoyed, and that script I liked an awful lot. I would like to do a second one of those. We'll see. We'll play it all by ear. I'd never say no to anything. If the scenario is right, I'd love to. I think he could turn up in the Belgian Congo, something like that, in the 60s. that was a big hotspot for mercenaries and fighting, a little like the Red Berets or Wild Geese, you know. And he turns up there. Do you remember the Wild Geese with
I do,
Jim
yeah. Oh,
So you could do
brilliant
something
film.
like that, which I think would be a lot of fun. And you'd have him with a few others, you know, with a few other sort of action type veterans. You know, you could do an ensemble piece. Maybe that would be the way to get a bigger budget.
So after One Ranger, what can we expect to see from you next?
I think the next one is October release of a passion project. And when I say passion, I mean a film that took me probably 20 years to get made, which is Boudica, which is about the female warrior leader who led the uprising against the Romans 2,000 years ago. And it stars Olga Kurylenko, and I'm very proud of it. It's a tough indie movie. It's not Napoleon. It's not a big budget film with thousands of extras, but it is a hell of a picture, and it's really, really quite heartfelt. It's left a lot of the screening audiences in tears and crying about it. So it's a very, you know, in good tears. I mean, they liked it. Not that they invested in it. They cry. But it's a very, very powerful picture about a powerful subject matter, very, very English to its core. And that comes out at the end of October here in the US. It's a theatrical release, which I'm very, very excited. And then after that, I have a picture called Chief of Station, starring Aaron Eckhart, Alex Pettyfer, and Olga Kurylenko again, which is a spy movie, which is more in keeping with the 1980s, 90s spy genre. It's present day, and it's a very modern film, but it harkens back to the old Cold War a lot. And I'm very proud of that one. We've got a great car chase at the end of it, some good action. Aaron Eckhart is phenomenal in it. Alex Pettyfer's very, very good in it. So I'm hoping that will get a theatrical. And my guess, that would probably be first quarter 24 release on that one at the moment. You know, but it's finished and done, and really, really big budget feeling and good. Cost about 12 times what One Ranger cost, which doesn't make one better than the other. I'm very proud of One Ranger, and I think, as I say, there are things that a B movie can do that are appealing and wonderful, and people enjoy often more than they enjoy sitting down watching something that's been homogenized and polished, and you know, you got a corporation backing it that's worried about whether you mention this or mention that. So it's oftentimes it's nice to have a picture like One Ranger because it really shows something personal. So, for example, that shot in the background there of the Houses of Parliament, we couldn't get permission to shoot that, and I was actually pulling my hair out because we needed all of these shots for the green screen of the Houses of Parliament. And we get there, and my girlfriend said, "There's a hospital on the other side of the river that overlooks it." And I'm like, "Yeah, you can't get hospitals. They're going to have all these kind of security things." She goes, "Let's give it a shot." And with her leading the way, managed to get us through security up to the 8th floor. We put the camera up against the window, got all of the shots we needed, and came back. It was amazing, completely. You know, and those are the shots that are in the movie. And funnily enough, one of them is in the trailer, which has been, you know, Lionsgate is showing. We just nudge each other each time we see it, you know, which is brilliant. So these are the fun aspects of making an indie film, you know, that I like, and you know, I used to like watching when I saw that kind of film. So even though Chief of Station's much bigger, I think there's a lot for both.
One Ranger's definitely a brilliant throwback, and it's good to see Thomas Jane back in the saddle of action. And then I look forward to speaking with you again, hopefully at the end of October, and then hopefully in the first quarter of January, and we won't leave it so long next time.
Be fantastic. I look forward to it, Jeffrey. Thank you so much. And I do apologize for missing the last one, man. And let's keep it going. You have my email, so feel free to, you know, absolutely free to reach out whenever you want to.
That's perfect. Thanks very much, Jesse. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Great questions. All right, man.